Welcome Wargamers to day 4 of Seraphon week, where today we're going to focus on the little guy. I'm talking about the skinks and the various skink units that make up a Seraphon army. And we're going to dive right into this talking about the most basic level warrior that this faction has, and that is basically the skink and the Chameleon Skink. So let's just give a proper definition. What is a skink? Well, it's basically a nimble and clever little skirmisher used by the Seraphon. They're fantastic as a flanking force, hurling javelins, shooting darts, and they're intended to help divide and distract the enemy. And it's easy to mistake them for just kind of being the generic horde unit that goes in there and gums them up in the main line. These are not the main fighting force. Those are the Saurus warriors we talked about yesterday. But these are intended to be a scouting unit that the enemy simply cannot ignore. They combine the same theme of intelligence that the rest of the faction has. And with that intelligence, they're able to perfectly coordinate their maneuvers with other units across the battlefield. It's perfectly synchronized. And to that end, they act as a great complement to Saurus units, where they are the stoic hammer that goes straight up to the enemy and starts tearing them limb from limb, and everyone's eyes front on them. These guys come around the back and they can make an enemy think that they're surrounded, and they functionally are, but it'll cause them to do bad decisions, to divert troops from the main war effort, and all of this plays straight into the Slaane's hands. And I said before, they were a good complement to the Saurus warriors because those guys just smash. They run up and they crush things. But these guys act more like patient hunters meant to trick and deceive. They scout out, get intelligence for the army, and then draw off units by piecemeal, kind of destroying any kind of coordinated war effort that the enemy has. But what's most important to remember is that they're doing this while the Saurus are also smashing. All these things are happening in unison, so not only are you getting wrecked on your main battlefield, but your rear guard, the things that are kind of securing your base, acting as an anchor, are being chipped and pulled away, so you really cannot ignore that. Putting your opponent in that position is the purpose of skinks. And as a subset of that, Chameleon Skinks are just really able to blend into any battlefield environment. And they're just like normal skinks, but they focus more on the patient hunter aspects rather than outright trickiness. But collectively, these guys are incredibly numerous, and they're intelligent and very well coordinated. Now, moving up, there are some very specialized units of skinks throughout the army. One that I want to do a quick shout out here is the Skink Oracle, who typically rides a very large beast called a Troglodon. We're going to talk about the Troglodon tomorrow, but I wanted to just shout out to the Oracle. Now, these guys aren't mages. They're not infused with magic or the ability to manipulate it, but they can sense it. And in these kinds of armies, it's all hands on deck. Everyone uses their max abilities, so these guys fill that role. They sense magic and are given a weapon, like a divining rod, to repel it. On the tabletop, this functions as they can try to unbind magic as if they were a wizard, because they can literally see it happening, point their mount, their beast, the Troglodon, towards where it's coming from, and do their best to shut down enemy magic. Now, the next two we're going to talk about are skinks that are actually attuned and are able to manipulate Azir energies themselves. The first one being the Starpriest. And these are the closest things to a generic mage in any other faction. They act as a conduit for the Slaane's magic itself. And with that, they're able to burn away foes with pure energy from Azir. Other than that, there's not much to say about them. They really are kind of a basic level wizard. Now, the second you go up from that, though, you have the Skink Starseer. And these are the greatest of all Seraphon that are underneath the Slaane. They work hand in hand with the Old Bloods, Old Bloods lead the military effort, but the Starseers add that kind of raw magic to the battlefield. All these things can operate independent of a Slaane, which is very important. I want to hammer that point in this week, that if the Slaane is busy, the Old Blood and the Starseer jointly take command. And what makes the Starseers so powerful is that they're more attuned to the mind and will of their Slaane than any other unit. The Old Blood knows his orders, but these guys know their Slaane. And they are also hyper-intelligent, however, they're a different kind of intelligence. These guys are much more aware of the present. They're unclouded by memories and deep thought. They're not trying to play the long, huge game like the Slaane are. And being more in the present gives them more of a grasp on what's needed right now. How do we win this? It also allows them to operate far more independently than any other type of Seraphon. Because every time this guy leaves his Slaane and goes out there and fights a war either to defend him, gather intel, something like that, he's adding more pieces, more dimensions to this giant game that the Slaane is playing. He really adds a lot to the army. Helps him play that big game. And they're so infused with this power that they can operate incredibly far away from their salon, almost, like I said, independently. They can absolutely lead forces of their own, and they're actually able to craft the power of Azir into physical form as well. Most of the time this takes form as weapons, but it's also his seat. The palanquin that he's riding around in is made of energy that he forms himself and covers it in runes to kind of funnel that power in. Now the next kind of skink unit that we want to talk about is the hunting packs. This is when we move away from what the skinks are themselves and the abilities they may or may not have, and we're moving now into how they function with other beasts in the army. The skinks are really the ones who interact with other creatures more often. You'll see them riding atop things or guiding little monsters that they have as allies. It's because they are incredibly intelligent, and taking them away from a battle doesn't really take a lot from the war effort. Like a Saurus is a great warrior to have, but you can always spare a few skinks to lead, say, a Razordon into battle. So going back to the hunting packs, this is where skinks use that same intelligence and craftiness to direct living weapons of war. And these are really the beasts from the old world. But the Slann absolutely remembers them as well, and now they're formed out of pure Azir magic, just like the Seraphon themselves are. Because of that, they are so also equally repelled by chaos that it's easy for them to find their prey and not get bogged down with attacking friends. In the heat of battle, they may hit their handlers, but it's not a terribly usual thing. And hunting packs really come in two forms. I mean, there's two types of beasts that are typically used, and that's the Salamander, which is a giant lizard that shoots gouts of flame at the front. And the second is the Razordon, which is a spine-covered beast that thrashes and tramples the enemy. Really, there's one that's more of a ranged combat, and one's more of an up-close and personal. Next up are the Terradon Riders. These act as the scouting aerial unit of the Seraphon, and they carry with them like rocks of pure Azir energy that are able to hurl down like meteors at the enemy. When the army arrives as a faction, these guys will bust forward, drop their volley of attacks, and act as scouts in the meantime. Then they fall back and defend the Slann. They are really adept at hit and run tactics, doing strafing runs with these giant rocks. And they're somewhat more defensive. They use speed to their advantage. Like I said, they're mostly for scouting, intel gathering, and then kind of harrying the enemy throughout the battle, hitting and running. However, to complement them, there are the Ripperdactyl Riders. And this is the more aggressive variant, right? If Terradons are skinks, these guys are Saurus, in our little analogy here. And these guys, Ripperdactyls I should say, have one instinct, and that is to feed. And they are let loose and just tear straight into the enemy. This is another one of those things, kind of like the cold ones with the Saurus warriors we talked about yesterday. It's not so much that it's a rider and mount situation, it's just that you take a deadly creature, and because you put someone with a javelin on top of it, it just gets better at doing what you want it to do, which is to kill the enemy. The Skink Rider is just on it to ensure that it's being as lethal as possible, not really to guide it. Where the Terradons use speed to hit and run, Ripperdactyls use this like an arrow and go straight for the throat. They are so incredibly aggressive, they just get in there and make things happen. So why are skinks cool? Why are they a cool thing to add to an army? If you are a Seraphon player, the starter collecting box does not come with any skinks in it, so why would you go out of your way to include these guys? Well, for starters, they offer a nice variation in tactics. Massed regiments, a lot of attacks, dumping bucket loads of dice, some cool alternate paint schemes, and whenever you bring a beast, like a larger creature, into the mix, typically it's going to be the skinks riding it. Unless it's a Carnosaur, it's usually a skink, because they're clever. Because they learn how to use and manipulate living engines of war, and that is what makes them so freaking phenomenal. If you are playing the game and you want to try something different, if you play like these guys are written in the books, they are actually incredibly effective in the game. If you use them as a flanking force or to hold objectives, they will function on the tabletop exactly how they're supposed to be written in the books, meaning they have to split your enemy's forces. Your opponent can't afford to ignore a 20-man block of skinks sitting on objective. He has to deal with that. Likewise, if there's a set of Chameleon Skinks hiding in terrain, they are hard to dislodge, and they're going to get some work done if they are ignored. So kind of to sum it up, what I love about these guys is they function on the tabletop exactly how they're written, and they offer a lot to the kind of visual aspect of this army and giving you all kinds of new modeling opportunities and some really cool units to play with. And that, my friends, is all I have to say about skinks in a Seraphon army. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're wrapping up Seraphon week here pretty quick. Tomorrow we'll conclude by talking about the monsters of Azir, all the beasts that these guys use. I appreciate you watching this video today, and I look forward to seeing you in tomorrow's Age of Sigmar lore video. Thank you so much for watching, and happy wargaming.